Hello and welcome to ParanormalNL Podcast. That's PNL Podcast for short. I'm your host and founder, Jen Nosworthy. This is a pre-recorded show broadcasting on UPRN, United Public Radio Network, 107.7 FM in New Orleans, USA, and 105.3 Gulf Coast, USA. Listen to ParanormalNL Podcast on UPRN on Tuesdays at 5 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And follow UPRN at uprntalkradio.com and all other socials. Now, ParanormalNL Podcast believes in promoting paranormal networking and paranormal tourism all over the world. Contact me, your host Jen, at paranormal.nl.podcast@gmail.com or follow me on PNL Podcast at Linktree, and that would be Linktree/PNL Paranormal NL Podcast. So in this UPRN 107.7 FM pre-recorded segment, I talk with author Nomar Slevik. Now, Nomar is an author, researcher, and independent creator in numerous aspects of the paranormal. He delights in sharing stories through different mediums like books, documentaries, and podcasts. He has shared his works with hundreds and thousands of enthusiasts and has maintained a steady output of material for over 20 years. Slevik has been fascinated by all things paranormal since childhood, beginning with a UFO encounter at 4 years of age. Now, he has a life's passion and to begin research, investigation, writing, and sharing UFO and SET encounters from everywhere. And in a way that conveys the human element of profoundly strange encounters. Now follow Nomar at allmylinks.com Slevik. That's Slevik. Now, without further ado, let's bring Nomar on the stage. Welcome, Nomar.
Hey, Jen. Thanks so much for having me back.
Thanks for being on the show. Yeah, you were on the show back in season 2 with me previously. Yeah.
It was a good time, and I'm happy to be back. Thank you.
Yes, and we're not doing radio this time. We're doing video. We're kind of sort of doing radio, but a little bit differently. You actually get to see you this time. So, how's Maine?
Maine is good. We had a pretty good summer. We had a really rainy spring, a pretty solid summer, and it's November, and it was like almost 70 just the other day, which is insane. But today's been really super windy, and I think the wind chill makes it down into the 30s, but we're still around like 50 degrees today, which is crazy for Maine.
We actually had a good day today. So, but sometimes you can say our Newfoundland weather is pretty horrific. But now tell me more about you and what you do. I know you're an author and you've got a new book out. Maybe I should bring it up on the stage here.
Oh, sure.
This is the Nomar. This is your store. Tell me about this.
Yeah, this is my online store. Yeah, that's the latest book, UFOs over Maine. It's the 10th anniversary edition. So the first one came out in 2014, and it was published by Schiffer Publishing, a great little outfit in the States here.
Happy anniversary.
Thank you. And it was about, I want to say 2.5, almost 3 years ago. I was trying to think of what my next book project could be. And I was thinking back about UFOs over Maine and how the 10-year anniversary was coming up. In that first book from 2014, it had about 20, 25 encounters in it. It was a thin book. The publisher didn't want, a big tome of a book. It's just a small regional book. So for the 10th anniversary, I got this idea that I wanted to completely dismantle it and build it up again from the ground up. So I completely rewrote it. All of the original encounters that were in the first book are in this book, but I also added about 150 more cases from the state of Maine. And it took about 2.5 years to get everything where I wanted it to be. And it came out earlier this year in the spring. And I'm really excited about it. It's it's
I love the
UFOs over
cover
Maine.
of it with
Thank you.
the spookiness of it, And when you think about Maine, you always think about the quintessential lighthouse and stuff like
Sure.
that. And it's always so dark. Maybe do you think that holds the key in Maine seeing so many UFOs?
It's certainly possible. We certainly in most areas of the state have a pristine view of the night sky, and yeah, so maybe that is a part of it. But I also know that people pay attention a little bit more up here. We're not always buried in our phones. We like to go outside for walks, even in the winter, even when it's below zero and it gets dark at 4 p.m.
We're the
We're
same
still
way here in Newfoundland.
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, of
you see
course,
men running around in their shorts here when even in the snow. No more.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And very similar here, so when we have those moments, I feel like we tend to notice things.
For sure. So tell me some of the stories in your book, or some of the things that stick out in your mind as some of the forefronts there in Maine.
Yeah, there's actually a lot of, I guess in my world, famous to Maine cases. There's one about the Allagash abductions, and that was four men who aren't from Maine. They're from Massachusetts, but they came up to Maine for their spring break when they were in college back in 1975. And a lot of people, if you're like if you have passive interest in UFOs, a lot of people confuse this case with the Travis Walton case in Arizona because they kind of happened around the same time, and it was a bunch of guys. But this case was in Maine, and it was only four guys, and they came up to the Wilderness Waterway near Baxter State Park. And they were going to spend about 10 days, hiking, fishing,
Right? Yeah.
hunting, doing all
Like
the
you
all
would
the
in
main
Maine. Lots
stuff.
of fun
Yeah,
stuff. Yeah.
yeah, yeah, yeah. And the first day went great. The second day, they're on this lake, and there's a lot of other people there that are camping out, and there's tents and kids and families, and there's barbecuing. And everybody saw this strange light in the sky. It was kind of like a second moon, and it kind of appeared around dusk, and then it took off, and everybody's like, okay, that was different. And they kind of went back to what they were doing. It wasn't until a couple of nights later where the four friends, two of them were twin brothers, and then the other two were friends. They were camping in a more remote area, and they were actually the only ones at this little campsite. And their provisions at that point were running low, their protein especially. They hadn't caught a lot of fish, and that was worrisome to them. So they went out that morning. Again, this is a couple days after the light. They went out that morning, and they didn't have any luck catching fish. So, they came back and they did a few more activities, but, as night was nearing, they're like, we really gotta do something to catch some fish. And they said, well, let's try some night fishing. Maybe up in this area, we'd have more luck at night. So they decided to build a big bonfire so they could find their way back to their campsite in the dark. They would have the fire to help them get
Right. It
back.
does get pretty dark, doesn't it? Like we were saying earlier.
Oh, for sure. Like it's hard to see your hand in front of your face if there's no
Yep.
street lights or anything, unless the moon is out. So they go out night fishing, and lo and behold, they see that light again. And they're staring at it, and then it starts to move, and it almost seems like it's descending. It almost seems like it's coming at them. So they kind of freak out, and they're paddling away, and they're like, what is that? And everyone's scared. And then the next thing they know, they're all back on shore at their campsite. Three of them are standing on shore, and one of them is in the boat, which is pulled up on shore.
Hmm.
And they're all staring up at this light that's hovering above them. And then the light shoots out this like beam of light down at the water, and then it sucks that light back up, and then it takes off. And the guys are just kind of standing there looking at each other, and they're like, well, what the hell just happened? They don't have any memory. It seems like they've just been gone a couple of minutes. And they decide to, turn around, let's go sit at the picnic table. They didn't catch any fish. And then they noticed the bonfire, and it was down to embers.
Hmm.
So
That
that
means it's been there a long time.
Yeah, exactly. So that was troubling to them. They had no memory. So they all went and sat at the picnic table, and they were just so like drowsy and lethargic and kind of couldn't get out of their own way. And they all just ended up falling asleep right there on the picnic table. The next morning they wake up and they're almost, like hung over, and they're like, what the hell happened last night? And, nobody knows. Nobody really remembers the light. And they still have like another 5 or 6 days of being in Maine up in this area. And they go through the motions and they do the hikes and they do the swimming and, but it's not the same. They're trying to enjoy themselves, but there's just something wrong. There's a sense of dread or, there's that lump in your throat that you don't know
That sixth
why.
sense where something's
Yeah.
wrong, but you don't know
Yeah.
why, kind of thing.
Exactly.
I wonder,
So,
did the campfire draw that thing in?
boy, that's a good question. I don't, I don't know if anybody's ever asked that question. That's interesting. And possibly,
Mhm.
yeah,
Yeah, if you're in such a
that's,
dark area, you light a campfire.
yeah, it's like, whoa,
Uh,
you're a beacon. Okay, we'll go over
right,
here.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
you become the lighthouse. So, okay,
Hmm.
they're wandering around, they're doing their thing, and they're
Yeah.
thinking, something might be wrong, but they're not quite sure.
Yeah, they don't know. They don't know what it is. So they go home, their lives pick up where they were. They graduate school, some move away, some stay in state, a couple of them get married, one of them becomes like a full-time artist, which is really cool because
Okay,
they were all like in school for like arts and stuff.
okay,
And one of the gentlemen, as he was getting older and he's married now, he started having these weird seizures.
hmm,
And he was also having these really strange dreams. And he would be surrounded by these creatures in these dreams. And they looked very menacing. They looked like the quintessential gray, but
I was just gonna say, yeah.
taller. Yeah.
Okay, yeah,
And he would wake up often in a puddle of sweat. And through some hypnosis, it was even discovered that his wife had some experiences as well, which is
okay.
fascinating.
Was
And
she there
so
too?
she was
No,
not
right?
there. She was
Because there
not
was a
there.
bunch of guys.
That's
Okay.
right.
Hmm.
And
Makes you wonder, did they follow him?
yeah, exactly. And that's what he was thinking too as time
Hmm.
went on,
Yeah.
and that they had visitations at the home. So this, memory or this dream felt like a memory to him. And so he mentioned it to his doctor, because he was going to the doctor for these seizures he started having. And so the doctor, the gentleman was very forthcoming in what these dreams were and what he thought it was, extraterrestrial abduction of some sort. And being in the Massachusetts and New England area, the doctor knew of somebody that this guy could talk to about these extraterrestrial issues and dreams and stuff that he's having. And it was a gentleman by the name of Raymond Fowler. And Ray Fowler is a famous researcher in ufology. He's written a ton of books. He's from Maine and has lived a vast majority of his life in Maine. And he was down in the Massachusetts area for a MUFON conference in
Okay.
it was mid to late 80s. I think it was probably 10, 12 years. I don't have the dates in front
I
of me
got to
right
give a
now.
shout out to the New England director, Steve Firemi, Firmani. He was on season 2 also.
Oh, very cool. Very cool.
Yeah, yeah. So
So
he was in the
he,
area. He reached out.
Yeah, so Fowler was at a MUFON conference, and this gentleman that was having the dreams goes to this conference and finds Ray and goes up to his table, and Ray's there like signing books and, talking to other people. And then, this gentleman approaches and he starts telling him his story. And Ray gets that all the time. I get it all the time too, like these people sharing their story. And especially if you're like in the middle of working, because that's
Right.
working for us, being at a conference and signing books and talking to people. And I'm sure
Mhm.
Fowler gave a presentation of some sort. So Ray was trying to be nice to the guy, but he's like, all right, I got to get to other people here. There's a long line. I got to. And the gentleman was being a little persistent, and he's like, I'm a twin. I have a twin brother. And that kind of stopped
Okay, that
Ray in his tracks. And he's like,
sparked his
okay,
interest. Okay.
yeah, we got to talk more because Ray,
Yeah.
he was in the middle of working on the Andreessen affair stuff that was happening. He wrote, I think, like 3 books on the Andreessen affair, which is an incredible tale that happened from the New England area, which could be a whole nother show. But through his research, he found that extraterrestrials seem to be interested in the DNA or something about twins. And so he wanted to talk to this gentleman more and his brother and the two counterparts. And this ended up opening up a partnership for these 5 men now, adding Ray to the mix, where Ray coordinated having these guys take hypnosis sessions with this gentleman that he was familiar with and that he trusted. And it wasn't just one session. These 4 guys went through multiple sessions over multiple months to
Okay.
try to really dig at what was going on. And it was tough to penetrate at first, hence the multiple sessions that they had. But what ultimately they were able to break through is that these gentlemen, when they were on the canoe that night and they saw that light in the sky and it was chasing them, it had shot down a beam of light, and the beam of light finally like caught up to their canoe. So now the canoe and all the men were lighted by this light. And they said that it was more like some sort of energy tube, and they were sucked up into it, like their particles, their bodies broke apart into molecules and atoms, and then they were
Just
up
like
in
Star
this
Trek,
ship.
beam me up,
Yeah.
Scotty kind of thing, right?
Yeah, exactly. And then they were on this ship, and they were told to disrobe, and they were conscious, but they didn't have a lot of autonomy. So they knew what was happening. What they were telling them was weird, and they didn't really want to do it, but they felt compelled, So now they're all 4 of them are just like sitting there naked, which is embarrassing to them. And but they just can't help themselves, so they're just doing it, and they're sitting on this bench that is just this like thing sticking out of a wall. Like they thought that was strange how it just like came out of a wall. And they were almost called up like one by one to go through their examinations. And it reads just like
Just
a
like
lot
at the
of
hospital,
other.
except it's an ET ticket number. Number
Right.
2. Okay.
And so it starts to read like a typical alien abduction, with the poking and prodding and taking specimens for like blood and nails and semen. And the semen part especially, I think all 4 of them had a very visceral reaction. Even though it was a pleasurable feeling to have that semen extracted, it read like an essay, a sexual assault, and they felt violated, and
But
it
of course you
angered.
would. Yeah.
Of
I mean,
course, yeah.
yeah.
And it was interesting to read that. I don't,
It's almost
I
like how humans take guinea pigs or, different animals like rats and study them. They're kind of using us like
sure.
lab rats, right?
Yeah, and the whole time, communicating to them telepathically, like you're going to be fine, like don't worry about this, blah blah blah. And they all went through these sessions, of their examinations, and then they were let go, and they were returned back to their shore, and they actually remembered that 2 of the entities were walking the canoe. They were outside in the water and holding onto the canoe and walking the men in the
Hmm.
water up to the shore, which is kind of interesting.
And all of
And
these men were interviewed like separately and
yes,
interesting. And they all,
yeah.
okay.
And Fowler even took it a crazy next step. Not crazy, but a really cool next step where he had them fill out these MUFON forms that were really invasive, in my opinion, because they were asking so much information about their background.
Hmm.
And then Fowler, like a police detective, went and was like interviewing as much as he could, and mostly by phone, but if he could meet with them he would, but different family members and like bosses and people they knew in their lives, to
Trying to vet
really,
them.
yeah, really trying to get a
Mhm.
sense of who these guys were. And
Mhm.
if They had talked about, the abduction at all, in their personal lives when they got back. And everybody was like, no, like they actually kind of seemed strange when they got back. But, then they kind of got back to normal. And, so just a fascinating case. And I took this huge story and shrunk it down to this, 5 or 10 minutes that we've been talking here, but it's a massive, really massive story.
I want
And I
to
talk
know
about it.
more about the medical aspect of it, me being the nurse. Like, did
Oh,
they
sure.
find any medical things, implants, or,
Um,
things like that?
they, I don't think they found any implants. I'm trying to remember back. I don't think there was any implants, but there were some marks, I think, that a doctor examining one of the gentlemen had noticed, and he couldn't tell what it was from. I think that's the most amount of like evidence that was left behind, if you will.
Right. Yeah.
So it wasn't
And the
much,
seizure
but
activity didn't pick up after or anything like that.
no, no. And I think that ended up being like a separate thing, but his anxiety or whatever, sparked by the alien stuff was maybe exacerbating,
For sure.
that
Yeah.
other piece to
Hmm.
it,
Hmm.
but yeah,
Yeah.
it's a
That was an
fascinating
interesting.
story.
Yeah. I mean, I'm sure you've got a lot of other different stories in your books like that. Like, I know you have another book. If I go to, let me take this one off the stage and take that one off. I'm going to put a different one on. I'm just going to stop that screen and I'm going to put on another one. And this is where you find everything that's Nomar. It's called All My Links.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. So if I go into your store and I want to see your books, uh, let's go in here now because I wanted to. I was just in there a second ago. Let me go back. Goodreads. Is this where I find you, or is it here?
No, it should be Slevik store. It might
Oh,
be
here we
above
go.
that
Granite
gradient.
Skies. That's what I wanted to mention. I want to give a shout
Sure.
out to Mike. We both know Mike.
Yeah.
We both had Mike. Well, I had Mike Stevens on my show before, and he's with graniteskyservices.org. Do you want to give a shout out and talk a little bit about this book?
Yeah. First of all, I love Mike Stevens, and I'm so glad you had him on. He's got a fascinating story, and it's a lifetime of encounters. This is a gentleman that's been visited by ET since like 4 years old, and or even earlier, because there was a weird incident when he was an infant where he kind of turned blue for a little while, and it was interesting. But when he started having conscious memories of being visited, he was around 9 years old. And it was almost like class time when they visited. And he recalls there being like 3 or 4 entities. And when to see them visually for most of the visits, which went on for like almost a year, to see them visually, they were typically like wispy, smoky looking creatures. And that were almost humanoid in shape, but you couldn't get a real grasp on what they looked like. And he and I don't know if that was a screen memory or why they looked that way, but he remembers that there was like a motherly figure, and then there was a more military male figure that was really stern about time and getting all the lessons done, and all that stuff. And then he remembers a childlike entity as well that might have been around his age, or at least it was like a same mental capacity type entity that was there. And they would joke around together sometimes. And he doesn't really remember what the lessons were, but he just remembers that there was something that he was learning for a period of time on a weekly basis. And again, this went on for almost a year. And one of the last times these entities visited him, they kind of revealed themselves to him. They looked more like the typical type of aliens. where they had almost reptilian skin, really, interesting looking skin. Not that it was rough, but it was patterned, if you will, but also smooth. And, the female one looked more, like was a little bit skinnier than the larger male one. And then the childlike one was, more small. And during this last lesson, it seemed to him that there was another species or race of aliens that was trying to like intervene. And these aliens that had been teaching him these skills or whatever the hell it was over these last 9, 10 months were able to stop that from happening. He doesn't remember a whole lot around it. He just remembers that there was kind of chaos and that there was something else that was trying to intervene, trying to get in the way, and they kind of stopped it for him. And to his knowledge, that's one of the last times they visited him.
Yeah,
And
there's a lot of theories on, several different types of entities or beings, shall we say. Did you want to talk a little bit about that from your research?
sure, people have reported all different kinds of beings, and some of them, if people are familiar, will look like the creature from the Black Lagoon. A little lizard like, reptilian
Right.
like.
Yeah.
There are praying mantis aliens that people have told me about. This one little boy saw one. He described it as an ant.
Okay.
Which I thought was interesting. So like insectoid type aliens, and a lot of them are the gray like aliens. But even though there are some smaller ones, like the typical like 4 foot tall, whatever gray aliens with the big head, the black eyes, I get a lot that they are gray aliens, but they're much taller. They're like 7 feet tall, and they're very skinny with the bulbous head and the black eyes, but really tall. And I don't know if they're more akin to being in New England, like they like this area or something, as opposed to the small ones. But
There seems to be more.
yeah, I get a lot more of the tall grays
No,
as
there's
opposed to
other
the small
types
grays.
of abductees also. I've had Karen Wilkinson and spoken with her. She had Stolen Seed, Evil Harvest. She's a UFO abductee. I know L.A. Marzulli wrote the foreword to her book, and as well as Vicki Joy Anderson, and she was on too and talked about sleep paralysis, and that seems to be a very common theme also, is the sleep paralysis and harvesting and taking women and like you
Yeah,
mentioned earlier, taking the men and also the women, right?
yeah,
Very common theme.
yeah,
And
yeah.
what's your take on, if I switch gears on like CE5, like when I mentioned, do you
Sure.
think that it went towards them because of the where they had the bonfire going, or the fire?
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know. If you're speaking about that bonfire in regards to CE5, would that summon a UFO? I don't know.
Right.
People
Yeah.
have bonfires all the time and UFOs are not seen. So, what was special about that other than the really remote location,
Right.
which is again certainly possible. I have had some experience with CE5, but I also look at and read about CE5 experiences from others, and the Greer stuff. I
Yes.
gotta say, I'm not a
Stephen
big
Greer.
fan of. Yeah,
No?
I'm not a big
Okay.
fan of. No.
What about the
Um,
Beyond Skinwalker Ranch? Have you seen it on that? Where a
no, I
couple
have not
people
seen. I
just
have
kind
not
of
seen that.
summons him, like you mentioned?
Yeah, no, I haven't seen it on that, but I did try it myself once,
Ooh, they
and
say not to do it alone.
I did it alone, and
Okay.
I think it worked.
Tell us about it.
Sure, it was. I think it was like 2017, something like that, and I had gone to this area. It's called Casco, Maine, and I'd gone to this area because a gentleman told me that he had observed UFOs flying in and out of a portal that was like on a mountain peak.
Hmm.
And I had positioned myself in this area of Naples and Casco, Maine, where I was high up on this hill. It's called Hackers Hill.
Hackers Hill.
And yeah, and when you're up on Hackers Hill, you can actually see a few different mountain peaks while you're up there. And I wanted to sit there and kind of do an overnight sky watch to see if I could see anything go in and out of this mountain, you know? So I probably got there like at 6 o'clock, and by 10 o'clock, I was very bored. Nothing had happened. And, so I'd gotten outside of my car, and now, I'm leaning on the hood. Back then I used to smoke, so I'm having a cigarette. And I'm thinking back to some CE5 experiences, and I'm like, maybe I should try that. Maybe I can summon one.
Oh
So I
no.
do. So I do that.
Okay.
I close my eyes and I start kind of repeating a mantra over and over in my head. And this isn't it, but it was something like, it's okay to reveal yourselves to me. I'm open to seeing you, something like that. And I kind of kept
Right.
repeating that in my head. And I probably waited, 2 or 3 minutes doing that with my eyes closed, and repeating that in my head. And then I opened my eyes and I looked at the mountain peak, and I looked at the other mountains, and there was nothing. So I was like, oh man, okay. So I get back in my car and I rolled down the window, and behind me, my car is parked facing the mountain peak I'm supposed to be looking at. But behind me is a lake. And I just happened to look behind me over the lake, and that's where the moon was. And there was a light hovering over the lake.
Hmm.
It was non-moving, it wasn't blinking, it wasn't the moon,
No noise.
no noise. And I'm like, son of a bee, it worked. And I'm sitting there and I'm staring at it. So, I'm a UFO researcher, but I'm also human. So I'm just staring at it like an idiot for, a couple of seconds, like, oh my God, look at this. And, but I looked down, I'm like, oh yeah, I should probably record this. So I recorded with a full spectrum camera and my cell phone.
Okay.
So I'm holding both of them and I'm recording this light, and I'm recording it for maybe 10, 15 seconds. And then these headlights start coming up Hackers Hill. And I'm like, well, who the hell's this? So I put the cameras away, and these people, they park not near me, so it's not a big deal, but I'm like, who is this? Why are they up here? Like
Like,
right when
why
I
are they
start
up
seeing a
here with
UFO.
me? What's
Yeah,
this?
yeah. Like
Maybe it
as
is a
soon as
UFO.
I see a UFO, and all of a sudden people show up. So
Right.
it turns out that they must have been some teenagers or college kids or something, and they were smoking something. So I'm like, oh, okay, no big deal. So I pull out the cameras again, and it's gone. I'm like, no,
Yeah, you were like
I let it
cussing up and
distract
down
me.
then.
Right.
No.
But,
Right.
people can see the video on my YouTube channel. I mean, it's nothing more than just a light in the sky. Like a skeptic
Right.
will see it and be like,
Yeah.
well, that's just Jupiter, or whatever. But
But did you ever go back and look at some of the, like, do a little bit of research? Was it Starlink? Was it a planet nearby? Or, things,
yeah,
'cause you get the typical people asking things
yeah,
like that. Because I've had several people on talking about CE5s. I've had
sure.
Betty Collins and Reverend Leah Walters were talking about CE5 stuff, and of course Brian Bowden. I can give him a shout out, and I've had several different people or talk about things like that. And
Sure.
what do you think about all that? And you got the video and how you
Yeah.
felt. What's
Yeah.
your take?
I don't know. I like, obviously I think it's possible because I did it and then I saw something. It wasn't where I thought it would be, but it still was there. Now, just because a light appeared, it doesn't mean it was alien, but there was an anomalous light. It was unidentified.
Something.
Yeah, it was something. So I got to tell you, even though I've done it myself and I saw something, I don't know. I don't know what to believe. I've been doing research into all of this stuff for 25 years now, over 25 years, and I just have more questions than answers. Nothing ever gets answered, and I'm never ever like sure of anything. So is CE5 real? I have no idea. Did I try it and experience it? Absolutely. I think there's a lot of hoaxing and misinformation that happens around CE5, especially when Greer is involved and large sums of money are involved. I don't think that part of it's
Mm.
cool. But if you're out at a campfire and you're with some homies and you're just chilling and you want to try some CE5, just like some independent CE5, yeah, see if something happens. It might. I don't
Now,
know.
what I found interesting was you had talked about repeating a mantra. Now, to me, that sounds like a certain element of meditation, right? So, I've
Mm,
had some other people on talking about stuff like that, like Tony Rodriguez, and he's an author Beyond Sight, but he talks about remote viewing
mm.
and how there's an element of that involved in order to do it. Have you had many people talk about remote viewing with you and seeing
No,
UFOs or things like
I
that?
I haven't, but I find it fascinating. And when they have when these remote viewers or astral projection type people
Mhm.
recount their stories and the evidence that they can provide that like it happened, like they can prove certain things. It's really fascinating. But I haven't come across anybody personally that has, claimed to be able to do that. But I encourage it. Please hit me up. I'd love
But
to
there's
talk
so
to you.
many contactees, stepping forward, like the Dina Louise, and I've
Sure.
had her come on and talk about different things. I mean, and then there's also, I guess I can talk a little bit about Newfoundland and Labrador. I'm not sure if you ever heard of the Bell Island boom. Nomar, have you heard of that?
I've heard of it from you.
Because I've had Henry Crane, and he's from Bell Island. I had him on twice, and he talked a little bit about Bell Island. But um, what what about over further south? Like we're talking down by Texas and Edinburgh. Have you heard about many stories? Have you gone to the UFO festival there? I know I met author David Childress there. Noe Torres. He puts off the UFO festival there every year. I've had him on
Yeah,
the
yeah.
show.
That's awesome. That's awesome you've had him on. No, I'm not very well traveled, and that's basically because I'm poor. But I would love to go to a lot of these places, and it's
Well,
a
I
big
used to
part of.
live there, so I was kind of lucky in that way, right?
Oh, very cool. So no, I haven't been there, but I do know people in Texas, and there's lots of interesting stuff that happens in Texas, and that's from UFOs to weird creatures, and lots of strange stuff
I've
that
seen a
happens.
lot of
And
weird things there pre-SpaceX, because when I was living there, I used to walk on the beach now where SpaceX is over in Brownsville. That was before, Elon bought it and all that. But, even just driving, it's sort of like Maine. I mean, at night, it can be a very vast area, especially if it's
sure,
just on the highway and whatnot. But even during the middle of the day, we saw some weird stuff. And we're like, yeah, that's probably a drone or something, because you could see kind of like the light flashing off of it, the
sure.
sun. So we were thinking, yeah, that's drone. But, what is your take on, is it us? Is it our technology? Is it our military technology that we don't know
Yeah,
about yet that DARPA is producing? What do you think about that?
I think
Because I've had Jim Goodall on. He's a master sergeant with the U.S. Air Force, and he talked a lot about stealth, and he talked about blackbirds and stuff like that and stealth.
sure.
What is your take on that, Nomar?
I think it's certainly possible that there's some man-made stuff that's so far advanced that we just don't, us laymen don't know about it yet. And I think that could be a factor for some of the sightings. Do I think that's a factor for all of them? Absolutely not. But do I have an answer for what the other stuff is? No. I don't know if that are extraterrestrial aliens, meaning off of this Earth, or are they ultra terrestrial? Is stuff coming from the Earth, or is there an interdimensional thing happening? I really don't know. My opinion kind of has ebbs and flows as I get more information. Also, I might be really into a certain factor at some point because I'm like right in the middle of research, on something specific, and so I'm like, you know what, it probably is this, and then I get far enough removed from that, and I'm like, okay, maybe it's not that, but that's really cool, and it's obviously a possibility. So that's just a long way to say I have no idea what they are. I do think that they are non-human. That's
Okay.
the best answer that I have for you. All of the sightings, are they all non-human? No, but I do believe there is a percentage that are non-human. In
Yeah.
what context, I don't know.
We've had like even over here in I want to say close to us, like Newfoundland and Labrador,
Sure,
we're the Atlantic province. We've got UFOs over PEI with David Ross, who I had on, and this they're all over the place, and it seems like a lot of them are like we said, rural areas where you see them more. It seems like.
Yeah. 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 And, again, I think that goes back to what we were talking about at the beginning. We're not any better observers or anything, but we're just used to non-light pollution in our
Right.
skies.
Yes,
And so
exactly. Dark sky
so
initiative. Yeah.
something will grab our eye, and it happened to me tonight because it was so dark, and finally, like, night finally came, and the moon was just so bright, and it caught my eye, and I had to do a double take, because I'm so used to the dark sky.
In my logo, you can barely see, but I always hide a puffin in my logo, Nomar. And a puffin travels at night. What he does is he looks for the moon. So our puffins, pufflings, the baby ones, get confused when they see people's porch lights on and like big businesses with lights, and they
Oh,
follow
wow.
that light and get confused. And then we got to rescue them and bring them back to the ocean and say, okay, here's the ocean, go find the moon, right?
Right.
So we're trying to crack down on the light pollution too, as what we talked about
Yeah.
with the Dark Sky Initiative. I think that's really important. And a lot of parks and recreation, especially Big Bend Park in Texas, they were really producing that too, trying to assist, using different types of light sources so the animals and things don't get confused. And also
Yeah.
so you can see the skies better.
Yeah. And I know that Acadia National Park, which is like the big park in my area, uh, there was some sort of initiative as well. I'm not educated enough to like speak on it, but I do recall like reading something briefly about it like a couple years ago. That's interesting. And puffins are like, because we have puffins up here too. So I imagine it's a similar reason. But puffins, I didn't know, are like true lunatics. They love the moon, the lunar moon. That's really cool.
They do love the moon. Now, I'm going to bring up on stage some other pictures that I had shared for what I call your teaser.
Oh, sure.
And I think I'll pull up a video here.
Oh,
Do I have the audio? Hold on. No, looks like I don't. How about we go to the pictures and I'll bring up the audio a little bit. I'm just scrolling through, grabbing some pictures that I wanted to. I think I had added a whole bunch of other ones, but I don't see them on there right now. 9 comments, but they're. How about. Here we go. Let's try this again.
unalive themselves on their property.
Let's start it over. Here's your video. Play.
In Caribou, Maine is said to be cursed by unknown means. Not long after its creation, a cantankerous man would defend his property against children who would trespass. Years later, another man unalived themselves on their property, facing the road. The community thought it was a Halloween decoration until its gruesome discovery just before Thanksgiving. A curve in the road is the site of countless car accidents, with one witness stating, quote, "I would wake up frequently to flashing blue lights. Most of the cars ended up in the woods," end quote. In the 1980s, a teenager was babysitting when the ex of the baby's mother broke in, took the child, and attempted to unalive themselves on the railroad tracks near the road. He failed his attempt, and the child survived. Do you think it's possible for an area to be cursed?
That was one of your Halloween ones that you had there.
Yeah,
I don't know if you want to make any comments on that, or I love your
sure.
little videos that you do.
Thank you. My girlfriend and I started something called Slevik Stories, and it's where I share typically just a minute or a minute and a half, really compressed, strange stories, and from Maine, because Maine just has a ton of crazy stuff that happens. And that particular one was about a cursed road in northern Maine, where a lot of people say, a lot of bad stuff happens, on that road. But we've covered a ton of other stuff like a woman in red, UFOs, Mothman creatures. We've covered a ton of different stuff. And I really love sharing strange tidbits of information from from my home state. I just think it's fun and interesting to do. And I'm always looking for new ways to do it. I've done a documentary or two, and I've written a lot of books. I'm working on a new one now. I have a podcast, but
You want to give a shout out to that? I Want to Believe podcast, right?
Oh, sure, yeah. But just to finish the thought there, it's just a new medium to be on TikTok and share some short form videos. But the podcast, yeah, it's called I Want to Believe, and that's longer form, and it's audio only. And it's a long form sharing stories, again, strange stories. They're not all from Maine, though, so that's fun. I cover stories from everywhere, all over the world. And in
your
my opinion,
documentaries, right? Yeah.
say it again.
Oh, I was going to say, yeah, go ahead. I was going to jump on your documentaries, but we're doing the
Sure.
podcast. Yep.
Oh, yeah. So, the podcast is, again, it's audio only, and in my opinion it's like way overproduced. Like it's there's a musical bed and sound effects, and it's kind of told like a little bit like radio theater, just trying to make it interesting and something different to listen to. And they're anywhere from a half hour to an hour long, and it's typically one strange story that I cover per month. But yeah.
And then you're also doing documentaries that you mentioned.
Yeah. I've done a couple documentaries. One that I
I think
directed.
you did one recently, right? I thought I saw a new book also.
There's a new book, but not a new documentary. I would love to be in that game more often, but that's a rich man's game to make documentaries. It's really expensive, and the travel and all that stuff that's involved can be really tough. And I want to make them look nice, so having good camera gear is another thing, which I don't have, but you can rent them. But again, that's just another added cost. So it's a little tough to make documentaries. But I did fund one through GoFundMe, back in like 2018, 2019, and I got it successfully funded, and I was able to make a documentary, and it's called Otherworldly Amore, and it had a great run on Amazon for about 4 years, and I think it topped out at 450,000 views or something, which was crazy. And now it's on the Paraflix network, where it airs exclusively over there.
Nice, love that.
Yeah.
So I am over on your Facebook page now. And I was going to pull up that other picture of this one that I had mentioned. Do you want to talk about this?
Yeah, this is a new book that I'm working on. UFOs over Maine just came out last year, but that took like 2.5 years to get it where I wanted it to be. And I started work on this book late last year, and it's called Humanoid Encounters, and it's creatures, phantoms, and other strange entities sighted in Maine. So these aren't just UFO accounts. These are weird humanoid-like creatures that people have encountered in the state of Maine. And I'm being pretty loosey-goosey with humanoid creatures, meaning there's some ghost stories that are in here, and furry creatures, and lots of different things, but also really strange human-like alien type things are in there too. Pale crawlers are going to be in there. There's a lot of pale crawler stories that I've come across.
I love a good scary, spooky, strange creature stories. And
yeah, me too. Me too. And I think I've collected 51 total. It doesn't mean that all 51 are going to be in the book, but I've collected. I started doing some preliminary research last year, and I just kind of finished last month, with finding as many stories as I could, and really interesting ones that had enough meat on them to tell a full story. Because there's a lot of stories, and it's like, oh, somebody saw something crazy, and wow, and that's all you have, and you can't really write a story around that. But
no, but I'm sure your area has certain ones in particular versus other areas.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. So I'm really excited about it. So Humanoid Encounters, and I hope, I would love for it to be out next year. I don't know if I'll hit that goal, but I would love for it to be out.
Oh, and this is another episode of something that you were on, and let's go back 360. circle back to your UFOs over Maine. Again, your
Yeah.
10th anniversary. Congratulations. That deserves a huge congratulations for sure.
I appreciate that.
Is there anything on your page that you want me to bring up here or click on? The Great
If you
Escape? Is this one
click
I
on
wanted
the
to ask you
click on
about?
the
Yeah.
Great Escape. So this is a story from UFOs over Maine, but I kind of rewrote it as an article style so it could go up on a blog that a colleague of mine runs. And it's called apmagazine.info is the website, but it's AP stands for Alternate Perceptions. So it's Alternate Perceptions Magazine. And it's run by Brent Rains. And Brent Rains is a long time, 45-year investigator of ufology. He's originally from Maine, but moved to Tennessee a whole bunch of years ago. And he's a retired prison guard. I don't know if that's the exact title, but he worked in a prison for a bunch of years and he retired a couple of years ago.
Right.
But all the while, he's been doing his research. He's a student of John Keel. John Keel is a huge influence to him, and he wrote a fascinating book on John Keel, so you should check out that. The title escapes me right now, but if you look up Brent Rains and John Keel, it's going to come right up. And The Great Escape is a story from Maine that he wanted to post on his website. And it's about a gentleman named Kevin. And he was over at his brother's house in Bangor. And he had stayed there for quite a while. It got kind of late into the night. And he's like, oh, geez, I got to get out of here. So, it was like 1 a.m. or so. And he's walking to his car. And he starts to hear this voice. And it's like... he turned around. He thought it was behind him. He's like, what the hell is that? And then it turns out that the voice is like in his head. And then it's like everywhere. And it's telling him to calm down, to relax. Everything's going to be fine. And then he kind of passes out. He wakes up in this lighted room. Like the light's so bright, it hurts his eyes. So he, slowly opens them. And he's in this room. And the room looks like it has all these smooth walls. And all of a sudden, there are some creatures in this room with him. And this voice turns on again, like, calm down, we're not going to hurt you. But it's not working. Kevin's freaking out.
He's freaking out.
Yeah. And he's lying on something, like a table or something. He's not sure. And these creatures attempt to kind of hold him down. And long story short, because I know we're coming up on towards the end here, but he ends up kicking one of the aliens and he's thrashing about and he kicks one and it kind of flails back and hits a wall and slides down. And
he kicked one. You're the first person I've heard that somebody kicked one. I love that.
Right?
Okay.
Isn't that crazy? So the other aliens see this and they're like, okay. And they start backing away.
All right.
A moment later, this really tall, because these were tall aliens. These were 5-6 foot tall aliens, and they look like typical grays, tall grays. But this other one came in, and it was even taller. It was like 7 foot tall, like it was the ringleader or whatever, and it was even wearing different clothing. And it put its hands on Kevin's shoulders, and Kevin's terrified at this point, and he's not going to be fighting back again. And this thing puts this thing in his nose. And he's like, what the hell? And he starts freaking out. And then the next thing he knows, he wakes up with his face down on the pavement. Okay. And he's smelling asphalt. And he's like, what? Where am I? So he stands up and he's looking around and he's like, okay, I think I'm in Bangor. And then he sees a cop drive up. So he looks at the cop and he's like, can you tell me where I am? And the cop, for some reason, looks really angry. And he looks at Kevin and he points. And he's pointing to a street sign. So Kevin looks at the street sign. He's like, oh, okay, I'm just a few streets over from where my car is parked. Okay. He's like, why was that cop so mad? And he turns back to look at the cop and the cop's gone. And he's like, what? Like he didn't even hear the car drive off or anything. He's like, that was weird. So, he gets to his car and he gets to a friend's place and, it's like 6 a.m. now. So there's like 3 or 4 hours of missing time. And he's remembering, kicking this alien and then this head alien put this thing in his nose to make him like pass out or whatever. And I think they got annoyed with him and returned him,
They dropped him off and said, yeah, here, we don't want this one. Take this one back.
I think they call the ruckus. So hence the name, The Great Escape.
Well, everybody follow Nomar, and he's at allmylinks.com backslash Slevik. I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly. I've been
You
saying
are,
that
yeah.
now. And I'll also give a shout out again to UPRN and contact me, your host, Jen, at paranormal.nl podcast at gmail.com, or follow PNL podcast at the Linktree, which is Paranormal NL podcast. Now, UPRN, United Public Radio Network, is a 30-year-old award-nominated, well-established FM station with a large podcast division that calls New Orleans its home, and UPRN are pioneers in the ever-changing and evolving world of podcasts and bringing the absolute best productions in various genres, which include but are not limited to metaphysical, current events, lifestyle, sports, holistic, politics, and news. And the UPRN network also has a wide range of shows that collectively delve into topics which would be deemed high strangeness, including the paranormal, ufology, cryptozoology, ancient technology, civilizations, esoteric, occult, conspiracy theories, and anything else that would be considered unexplained and supernatural, out of this world. And again, UPRN is 107.7 FM, and we are doing a pre-recorded segment with Nomar Slevik. And Nomar, thank you again for being on the show tonight. We really appreciate it. Do you want to give a shout out to your fans?
Yeah, shout out to
We got
everybody
5 minutes.
listening. Shout out to Jen for having, and we got to shout out Kevin from Where the
Yes,
Weird Ones Are
I was
podcast.
waiting for that. Kevin, yes, Where the Weird Ones Are. Tell us a little bit about Kevin.
Kevin is amazing. You've had him on the show. You've been on his show, right? You've done
Yes.
the
No,
wrestling.
actually, I've had him on my show twice. The first was radio, second was video. So I'm going to be going on his show soon. But I heard a rumor he's got hot sauce, right?
Yes, he's got hot sauce, and I think he's going to have
weird
like
sauce,
supplements.
weird, supplements. Yeah.
Yeah. So he's doing his thing, and he's a fellow Mainer. He's from down in the southern area where I'm more on the mid coast. He's down in southern Maine, but he's a really amazing dude. He has a great podcast, Where the Weird Ones Are, and he has people from all over the paranormal onto his show, and they do like a monthly roundtable. He's actually a couple of other podcasts, one that he does with his kids, which is really cute. And then he started doing this morning podcast. I think it's on Sunday mornings or something. So he's got a lot going on. So we want to shout out Kevin.
In the morning on Sundays with Kevin.
Yeah.
Yeah. So follow Kevin too. And I think you're going to be doing something with him with some audio, because we love your voice.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, I would love to. Kevin, I don't know how much to tell, but Kevin wants to do something visually, and hopefully I will be involved in narrating this process. So that'll be very cool.
Yeah. And do you get very many people asking you to be narrating? And do you have your books on audio?
I don't. I'm an audio guy myself. Like, I do my own podcast and I do all of the audio for it. I've also been making music for a whole bunch of years. And so I'm very used to the audio process, but sitting down and reading a book on mic, and with all the mistakes I know I'm going to make, and having to edit that, where it's hour upon hour upon hour of just hearing my voice, that seems very daunting. I would very much like for somebody else to read the book. And we've attempted that a few different times and it's been unsuccessful. But if people are interested in hearing my music, I have a new single out. If you keep scrolling down,
Hysteria.
right there.
Yes.
Yeah, it's called Hysteria, and it's available wherever you get your music. So
I'm going to go ahead and
Spotify.
click on it.
Oh, sure. Yeah, it plays a little.
Go back to the front there.
STERIA, considerable contradictions with non-fictions all day. Okay, one last battle for the evening. I'm most certainly leaving. Seeing the benchmark, the bench press lies. It's a love story, y'all, most human advice. No compromise, unbearable bright light illuminates awareness all night.
I love it.
STERIA, considerable contradictions with non-fictions.
Everybody,
you.
make sure you follow Nomar. And Nomar, thanks again so much for being on the show tonight. We really appreciate you
For
being
sure.
on with us. And I guess I can go back again to your main one over here, UFOs
Yes.
over Maine. Pardon the pun, the main one. Yep, and I'm going
And
to give a shout out again to UPRN. You're listening in on UPRN, United Public Radio Network, 107.7 FM in New Orleans, USA, and 105.3 FM Gulf Coast, USA. We've got a couple more seconds left here, Nomar, if you want to give another shout out to anybody.
I think I'll say if you want to get a copy of my book, I do have my own online store, but if free shipping's your thing and you have Amazon Prime, just type my name into Amazon. You'll see my books come up. UFOs Over Maine is available over there. And but if you buy it from me, from my online store, it will come signed with a bookmark. You get it on Amazon. You don't get any of that.
Yay!
So it's my website is slevikstore.company.site.
Okay, make sure you do that so you get an actual signature and you get the bookmark. Thank you so much again, and peace out. I'm going to stop recording.